Yeah, let's do it. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for coming out for this fourth day of this just delightful festival. It's just been very energizing, very empowering, very just invigorating. So here we are. I'm Zach Salih again. I'm the author of the novel Let's Get Back to the Party.
And I'm Michael Carroll. And I wrote a book of stories called Stella Maris and Other Key West Stories. Hello, everyone. I'm going to start by reading some of Zach's work. That's two short sections from the middle of the novel and involving a particular topic. Okay. This is from the point of view of the character of Oscar. I answer the phone with one word, hello. My mother responds with two, he's gone. Harrison, 63. 2 years ago, you see, Harrison Burnham began to get confused. He'd complain of headaches and vertigo. More and more frequently, his hands would shake. He'd have quiet chats with the corners of rooms and barely touch dinner plates. My mother would come downstairs in the middle of the night to find him staring at the backyard, silent and confused, an empty glass in his hand, and an open container of apple juice on the counter. When he collapsed in the supermarket shopping for nacho fixings, he was bullied into seeing a doctor. The specialist who poked and prodded his body, if there's any justice in the world, there was a rectal exam. He doesn't like his father. Right? I got that right.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I tried not to make that subtle.
Were clueless. A latent effect, perhaps, of the car accident he had been in all those years ago, when he had refused medical attention because he had found Jesus among the shattered glass and spare change littering the roof of his overturned Chevy Blazer. 10 months ago, after he started progressively fading, my father used his disability payments to remove himself to an assisted living facility across town, too proud to suffer in front of his wife. While there had been no expectation of his death, a nurse, my mother told me in her clipped voice, had come in with dinner on Monday evening and found Harrison lying there in repose, hands at his sides, as if he had been ready to go for days, years even. The funeral service is scheduled for Friday. My mother asks how soon I can come home, and I want to laugh hearing that word from her lips. I tell her my financial situation and ask without shame if she'll pay for my flight. She agrees. I go over to my father's simple nightstand, open the only drawer. There are tissues, several pens, an open book of Sudoku. I can never pronounce it.
Sudoku.
Sudoku. It sounds like a vehicle. Puzzles filled out in my mother's steady hand, a limp copy of the New Testament inscribed with messages of support from names I don't recall. Something drops out of the book and onto my boots, a bookmark. No, a photo, one of those wallet-sized yearbook pictures my mother ordered every year. This one is from senior year. The face looking out at me may as well be the face of a stranger. Black hair ironed flat into a mop, giant glasses, the phantoms of several pimples along my brow and left cheek, the same tuxedo drape worn by everyone else. You'd look at a portrait like this and think, this boy needs to get some sun. This boy needs to get a life. Voices come down the hall. I tuck the photo somewhere deep inside Romans, put the Bible back in the drawer. I turn around, and there she is, still petite, still unassuming, still with that long, fat coil of braided hair, now gray with age. She carries 3 file boxes over to the bed with the deliberate steps of someone focused solely on movement, not introspection. She moves like someone who's medicated. Behind her, bear-like in his Cleveland Brown sweater, my Uncle Jason stares at the shirt peeking out from my open winter jacket, at the rainbowed lettered word queer. Oscar, he says. Jason, I say. My mother puts the empty boxes on the bed, gives me a hug, steps away. This is it, she says. All this has to go in here, then out to Jay's car. We can sort through it later. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for reading that so generously, Michael.
Oh, you mean the length?
No, just thank you for your it was just a nice reading. It sounds so much better coming out of your mouth than it does in my head.
Okay, that's nice. I wanted to read that. So this novel, let's get back to the party, is told from two different points of view. Two guys who've known each other from childhood. They're both gay. And Oscar, who we just met, is the more gay liberationist type guy who's promiscuous and hooks up a lot. I got that right?
Yeah, I wasn't subtle about that either.
And each of them, I have like three things to address here. One of them is that each of the two young men have lost a parent. And I was wondering what the thought process, the creative process of that is. And also I wanted to comment that even though there's a kind of elegance and brightness and liveliness throughout the prose, I like the clinical straightforwardness of these passages, which is why I picked them out.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what kinds of writing, what authors inform your tone? 'Cause you do have rather a special tone.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the kind of writer, I have great admiration for writers who can just sit and write and somehow discover a form in the process of writing. I for whatever reason, work very differently. I can't sit down and write a piece until I know the structure. I need to have a vessel in which to vomit all my thoughts into, otherwise it just goes all over the stones and is lost. So for me, the vessel for this story I wanted to tell, which is about, two 30-something gay men who live on admittedly extremes of a spectrum, with very different, very radical ideas about what it means to be gay at a particular time and place when so much of gay culture is changing. I wanted each of them had to have a separate voice, a separate style, even down to the way that their voices looked on the page. So there are the Sebastian passages, which are written in these blocks, these giant chunks of text. There are no quotation marks. There's nothing separating speech from thought. And my thinking there was I wanted to give the appearance of someone who is trapped inside his head. Who is almost using these bricks of text to kind of build a wall around himself, separating him from the rest of the world, which in its messiness makes him so uncomfortable. And then the Oscar passages which you read are for lack of a better term, in the kind of more traditional way we tend to see prose laid out on the page with quotation marks and short sentences. And his voice, I wanted it to be very superficial, at least for most of the text. Sebastian is someone who is so entrenched in the past. He cannot do anything but dwell on the past, and Oscar is the exact opposite. He's someone who lives entirely in the present. He can't be bothered to think about the past, whether it's his friendship with Sebastian or his relationships with his father, who estranged father, who basically, when he came out to him, gave him money to finish college and said, "I never want to see you again." And so the style and the structure of the way Oscar speaks, to me, was intended to kind of convey the nature of his character.
Right. The way you record dialogue is different between the 2 points of view.
Yeah.
In Sebastian, it's all internal, all inside the paragraph, whereas with Oscar, it's the more traditional line.
So to answer your question, you also asked about references. So, I was just thinking about very kind of flighty. I wasn't, for Oscar, I didn't have an author in mind so much as I was just thinking about the kind of flighty, clipped way that, we communicate over text messages or social media. It's not written that way, but a kind of, very, very kind of short, clipped, direct sentences. Sebastian, who, for anyone who's read the book, I don't think it'll come as a surprise that I hold a little bit dearer to myself and identify with a little bit more. For him, again, because he's spending so much time in his head, I was thinking of Jenny Erpenbeck, who's a writer that I really like, and I just have a real kink for, just large blocks of uninterrupted text, and And I suppose I was also thinking of, Thomas Bernhard, right, the Austrian writer, and whose characters are just these kind of madmen who are trapped in a castle and just ranting to these usually unnamed listeners.
In great blocks of prose, paragraphic prose.
Yeah.
Sebastian's a saint, and Oscar's a muppet.
Yeah. Oscar, there's a point at which Oscar develops a kind of conflicted, strange relationship with this gay author that he meets at a bar. And the author understandably thinks he's named after Oscar Wilde. And he explains to the author that no, he's actually named after the Muppet, Oscar the Grouch, because he was so colicky as a baby and did nothing but scream and complain, which I just want to be clear is not me. I was supposedly a very quiet child.
Right. Yeah, there was something I want. Oh, you have one other mode that struck me immediately, which is that with Sebastian, who's an art teacher or art history teacher.
Yeah. Art history and honors English. Yeah.
Right. A lot of his thoughts and his personal actions are framed with him examining artworks from over the centuries, and it's like a reference point for him. It's the way he keeps his imagination alive while he's waiting to find a boyfriend, I guess, or something.
Yeah.
And like the Copley painting of the Dr. Watson.
Watson and the Shark, which
the
hangs
shark.
in the National Gallery of Art in D.C.
And he's got, as one character points out, kind of a womanly body.
I think he, I think it's Oscar who, and I don't know if you're familiar with the painting. It's this beautiful painting of a shark attack, and there's this naked blonde youth, this kind of proto-twink, lying in the water, reaching out for all these men on a boat who are rescuing him, and his leg is bitten off, and you can see the shark, charging in from the right-hand side of the frame. Yeah.
He's actually a twunk.
A twunk, yes. And anyway, so this, we could go on all day. And this is the painting under which Oscar and Sebastian first meet as children on a field trip.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to say is that Oscar, his thoughts about his personal life, his sexual life, his future life as a gay person, a liberated gay person, that all has to do with his reading the books of this gay author that he's met in a bar.
Yeah.
And did you know what was going to happen? There are two steps I won't mention that happen toward the end of the book with the author.
Can you give me a hint that maybe won't spoil it? Or?
One has to do with New Hope.
Okay, yes.
The other has to do with No Hope.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Got it. So, I'm sorry, what's your question?
Did you know when you were writing the book what was going to happen with him? Sean Stokes is his name.
Yes, Sean Stokes is the name of the author who the character of Oscar comes to really aspire and admire to. Again, in the way that desire kind of deludes us, we don't really know about people. So he really actually more falls in love with a kind of, not an image necessarily, but through the stories of the kind of pseudo-memoirs that he's written about gay life in the 70s and 80s, pre-AIDS.
And Oscar's enamored of Sean Stokes' persona.
Yeah.
It's a sexually liberated person who is ahead of his time.
Yeah. But there's a turn in the last third of the book, and to me it was a kind of revelation that really hammers home this idea of when we desire, when we envy people, as I said the other day on the stage with Edmund White, we don't get the full picture. And so people always end up disappointing us. And they don't disappoint us because they've done anything wrong. They just disappoint us because it turns out they're human and messy and contradictory, and they do and think a lot of things that we don't know about or find out way too late. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the novel has a shape that I could never give to a book that size.
Well,
Partly because of that.
Well, you are a master of the short story form, and I think maybe I'll use that compliment as a segue to talk about you, sir.
Oh, please do.
I listened to Stella Maris, which I recommend everyone pick up from that tent over there. I listened to your recording of it on Audible, and so you were on the plane down here. You were like a siren summoning me down to Key West, and so it's only recently this morning that I actually got to read it in print. And I want to, if you'll indulge me, I want to read a couple pages that I found particularly fascinating, and then we can use that to segue into a question.
Okay.
Oh my God, and of course I misplaced my bookmark.
Well, while you find it, I just want to say that I was asked to read the audiobook, and I have no idea why. But if you publish a book and they say, do you want to do the audiobook for Audible? And I did it in the middle of the pandemic, so everybody, was very separated. There were sheaths of plastic everywhere. And so this is what it sounds like. You have headphones on, and you start talking, and you fall in love with your own voice.
This is just a couple pages from a short story of yours called The Other Way Out. And I don't think there's much that I need to explain. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're kind of in the head and kind of seeing the world over the shoulder of a character named Randy. And this kind of oscillates between thoughts and impressions. I'm a placeholder. I always was. I'm lonely at times, but I'm wanted, and that's me too. The tranche of property is lovely. Verger came back with a vengeance, even exotics. Here, he can pretend that differences don't matter while running from small differences. A relationship where everything was fine when in fact he wanted someone a bit younger. A little bit prettier, but only a little bit. But new and fresh, that's all. And what else? He's denying his childhood. It's instinctual, a survival, evolving out of the biblical norm of Judeo-Christian superstitions that hold together a tribe, norms, crowd control, the supernatural. He wonders if Javi, a fashionable, if overworked player in New York society, who also should have died and collects a modest monthly check, cares about anything but the property. It is worth more than the structure, the slice. Only the sliver of sand and coral rock in the middle of Key West is worth something before the big one, and after, if the island doesn't all wash away. The houseboat means nothing, although when he's here, he goes on Grindr and the other sex-dredging apps. When it storms, this structure rocks on its landlubber mooring. It's a magical feeling, sex, and the feeling of Robert Louis Stevenson dry-docked but holding fast, waiting for a flood, the storm surge that is inevitable. People don't want to talk about it in the Trump era. The Mango Mussolini who gives meaning to the disparity in America, the difference between what's real and what's abject, obscene, morally filthy, between what should be and what shall never be. In the hypothetical theme, a rusty harmonica whine into a silvery dobro slide. He used to love people, lovers and family and exes. He's no longer thus encumbered. He told the others sharing his last name to go fuck themselves and never call him again. They obeyed, morons. You belong with a lover like a riotous tropical plant, a vine. Be a strong-rooted lover, a tree. Be the one who supports, upholds. Be the one who cares, though you may no longer care. This is the last ditch gorgeously inclined with flowering vines, the bougainvillea, the trumpet flowers, the pitcher blooms, the up-gasping blossoms that last a fortnight, lovely nights. A night-blooming garden here in this garden that helps describe the utopia of the night, a heaven. Sip of chalky dark red wine. Dark and plumbed by sin, suddenly bright in patches and whorls, the blooms of evening. Another sip. The bloom spots, the ghosts of midnight or else pre-morning, the denizens of pale gloom. Moonbrights, star furls, scent spots, quick and almost undetectable, a dim squint garden. And may my love travel with you always, he thought foolishly, but only to never-hads. Solitude germinated them, loneliness made them effloresce shyly while no one watched. I just think that is a beautiful sentence, and yeah. And I think I and a lot of other writers could write entire novels just to arrive at that sentence. Solitude germinated them. Loneliness made them effloresce shyly while no one watched. I am a long-standing and long-practicing and long-suffering student of melancholy myself, and I'm really curious. I have two kind of overarching questions. The first of which is, and this is not a complaint by any means, so many of the characters in these stories are sad and unhappy and wistful, and so not where does that come from, but I guess what about that kind of excites you, and is it the characters who make the story, or the other way around?
I'm not sure what excites me. I'm not sure if I wrote that here in Key West, but if I did, it was white wine from CVS. But I think melancholia has its attractions, but when I read this for the audio book, I remember thinking, okay, enough, girl. let's do something different, you know? Let's do like a Sesame Street musical or something.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the city itself. It's just the island itself. The darkness, like wandering around at 3 and 4 in the morning, and you have these giant trees and there's light, and it's like a cathedral roof, you know? Lights shining through the trees. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. It's dark, and we got 5 minutes. It's dark, and it's colorful, and it's rich, and it smells like pine and flowers and everything. And most everything that's growing here is exotic. It's mm-hmm. not from here. Mm-hmm. It's not mm-hmm. tropical. It's subtropical. Did you mean 5 minutes for questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, as I said, I read the audiobook, and I looked at the engineer, who was a very young man with a mask on. And he had these like really wide eyes through the booth, and I was like, oh God, I've just frightened him and made him if you're homosexual, you certainly don't want to go this route. Don't read my book.
Well, that's happy people in literature are so freaking boring. Like, who wants to read about that? There's no satisfaction in that. In that regard, desire is almost kind of antithetical to happiness, right? Like the pursuit of desire, to kind of piggyback off what Jamie Quattro and Lauren Groff were talking about in their talk, is that kind of almost there. Like, it's the pursuit that's more erotic and more charged than the satisfaction. And if your characters or mine were, completely sexually and emotionally satisfied, I mean, what need would we have to even write these books?
I think that once you get through writing something like that, or maybe reading something like that, mm-hmm. then you just kind of feel better. But writing it is, it's not tedious. It can be kind of fun. But a lot of what I write is informed by all the music that has formed all these layers in my brain. Mm. Like music from the 70s and 80s and the 60s, and then some classical elements and stuff like that. And I'm just sort of like trying to approximate that sound. Mm-hmm.
So when you're writing these stories, are you, I know it's cliched to say, but are you writing as a form of therapy? Not to say that these are all inspired by your own life, but is it a way to kind of articulate and therefore kind of maybe,
I don't think
with?
so. I just wanted to like exercise my imagination, and like the thing about most of those flowers don't exist. I just made their names up.
Really?
Yeah.
I would have known no better.
It was about the sliding sound sense.
Yeah.
Moonbrights and star furls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Almost none of them exist.
It's very beautiful prose.
Okay, should we do questions then?
Yeah, yeah. Or we can just tell jokes.
Tell jokes.
I've got a question. Michael, I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the craft of assembling a bunch of short stories into a collection, and as you're putting the pieces together, are you looking to have the pieces talk to each other? And if you, Disha earlier talked about like a set list and a playlist. If you rearranged it, are there effects you're going for?
Effects, yes. I think I have two collections of stories. The first one was just me trying to get published. But most of the stories in that first collection were published in magazines and so on. With Stella Maris, I had been writing about Key West because I come here every year, except for 2 years in the last 26 years. And I know a lot of people here, have known a lot of people here for a long time. And I remember one year I was sitting alone in the guest house that we rented, and it was the middle of the month, and I told some people this story yesterday at the bookstore, and I thought, it really depresses me that there'll be one day when I won't be able to come back, because it's like such an important time for me. I get a lot of writing done, and you know. And then I was just sitting there, and I didn't have anything to do because I don't have a job, and I was like, you're here, just fucking appreciate it, you know? So that's where this book came from. I had been writing some. The last three stories in Stella Maris are older. And then an editor wrote me and said, write me a story. So the first 3 stories I wrote in a month here in Key West, and they're all short. I wrote them so they wouldn't be too long to read at a reading. But even now, they're way too long to read at a reading. And they're all just they're more like different versions of my life, really. There's one story about an older man and a younger man, and they're both poets. And that's similar to my life. Does that answer the question? Okay. Thank you. Are you the one on Twitter? I have 3 Twitter readers. And one of them is not Obama. Somebody asked Zach something. There's one.
Oh, there we go. It's okay. When I go to these things, I'm too shy. I don't ask questions anyway, so it's only fair. But.
Zach, I wanted to ask you the question that you asked your fellow writer. Are you working something out psychologically in these 2 characters?
Not. I mean, the obvious answer is yes, only in that I think whether you're writing autofiction or you know, the kind of grandest sci-fi spectacle, I think it's no piece of writing can be entirely without some sort of personal connection. I mean, for me, the biggest kind of thing I was trying to articulate in this book was in terms of a personal level, was my kind of experience as belonging to this generational cohort of gay men who are sandwiched between these 2 very different experiences of what it means to be gay in America. I mean, there's the older generation, I mean, for whom the AIDS plague is lived experience. And for me, you know, even though I was alive at the time, I was very small, it's history, right? And then on the opposite end, there's a younger generation that's been able to benefit from all this increased visibility. And you know, there's one character in the book who's a 17-year-old high school student who, as he puts it, has been out since the womb. So it's a curious thing to find oneself in you know, kind of on a balance beam, you know, between these 2 very starkly different experiences of gay life in America. And so that kind of personal thing was the root of it. I mean, you know, on the one hand, it you know, to be somewhat crass about it, I feel like I did dodge a bullet. On the other hand, looking at the younger generation, there's that very awful but I think very human feeling about, you know, looking at younger kids and being like, oh, well, that's great for you, but what about me? And I think this is something that you know, every generation in their own way kind of has to negotiate it. You know, you're at one point you're the future, then you're kind of the present, you're in between generations, and then you become the past, and that's, I think, unavoidable. So that was kind of the personal impetus for that. Thank you for asking that question.
I think you just answered the question for me, too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because I was 18 when we got a little thing called AIDS, and I had already been, you know, active, and then they just messed up. A 22-year-old just like, oh, I think I'm just going to go have sex now. You know?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
nothing to them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Just by dint of being gay, I think desire is also loaded with different
Yeah.
with
They have
different burdens, different expectations, and different practices
Privilege.
too. Yeah,
Privilege, too. Yeah.
absolutely.
In here. I have
Hello.
a question for Zach. Could you talk a little bit about the two major secondary characters?
Oh, Arthur.
Do they parallel each other in any way in your head? They dance, kind of, in an
Oh
interesting
yeah, I
way,
like that
thought.
phrase. Yeah, I mean, going back to the previous question as well, they're kind of ciphers and foils for the two main characters, Oscar and Sebastian, who are my cohorts, who are men in their mid to, well, when I wrote it, I was in my mid-30s. Now I'm almost 40. But so there's the older author who's in his 60s, whose name is Sean Stokes, and then there's a younger student there's a younger kid who's a 17-year-old student in Sebastian's art history class, whose name is Arthur Ayer. And the thing that some readers have admittedly found frustrating about the book, which is totally fair, is that Oscar and Sebastian, it takes a long time for them. They connect at a wedding, and then in the first chapter, then they separate, and it takes a long time for them to come back into one another's orbit. Because I wanted them to spend a lot of time with these foils, and I thought the interactions between them were incredibly rich for me as a writer, but kind of. Way, to me, it was a way for them to avoid really connecting with the only person that they should be connecting with, which is each other.
That gets to a question I was going to ask. I think it's a very quick answer. Is that one thing I was struck by is that Sebastian, the more conservative character, has an erotic dream about Oscar and Arthur. I wanted to ask you, does that indicate that he has something for both of them, one of them, either, or it makes him feel like less? Like
Yeah.
he can see them doing it before he could see him doing it with either one of them.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And also, I think there's no way that one can write in about an adult, a gay adult, having conflicting feelings about a younger boy and kind of not be evoking, however unconsciously, Thomas Mann's Death in Venice. But I've heard from readers who found that relationship a little uncomfortable, and my own personal opinion is great. Discomfort is so much more exciting than comfort when it comes to reading. But I did want that relationship between Sebastian and his student to. I didn't want it to be as simple as, oh, he is sexually attracted to this boy. I mean, for the reason that Oscar desires Sean, the writer, the reason that Sebastian desires Arthur, the student, isn't just about sex. I think it's about the lives that they've led and the lives that they're leading, and that's what they desire. I just personally learned in my 15 plus years as a practicing homosexual. There's so many reasons to desire someone else, and they don't always have to be this kind of chiseled Adonis figure that we see so much in marketing. Although I would never pass that up. But there are so many other reasons to desire someone. It can be the shape of their eyes. It could be the way that they speak, or in the case of this novel, it can be these lives and experiences that they have that are so foreign to the way that we live.
Yeah, there's the sense of privilege, and there's the sense of the aesthetic pleasure and all that stuff. But also, at least the first three characters to me exemplify my experience with a lot of my friends, which is we all feel a little bit cheated by the life.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's our own fault.
So how do you think we come to terms with that? Have you thought about that at all?
There are a lot of addictions in the gay community, and there's a lot of alcoholism, and then there's AA, and then there's suddenly, I have friends who they turned 40 and then they were Christian and then they were Trump. There's a lot of coping mechanisms.
Well, here's a question, kind of, again, piggybacking off the moods of the characters in your short stories. I mean, what, and this is not intended to trip you up at all, but what does gay happiness look like to you? In fiction, or maybe just in our own everyday lives?
The cemetery.
Oh my God, that's dark. What does that mean?
I just walked through there and I took a picture of myself and I was smiling. So I don't know.
Oh, yeah. No,
What
you're
does
you're
it
right.
look like? Personal security, empathy toward others, a gift for giving and helping, partnership, and sex.
Could you go back and explain that throwaway line that you giggled after about your friends going from alcoholism to AA and then to Christianity and then to Trump?
No, they're all different outcomes. They're not. It's not a flow chart. It's not a flow chart. I and some other people here do have some friends who, once they turned 40, started going to mass and watching Fox News, and then started talking about the wall as this great thing that was inevitable, and started making a lot less sense. But I think for about 20 years he was smoking a lot of weed, and so on. So no, it's what I'm saying is different outcomes for different people, different coping mechanisms for different men. I don't know, like my husband's coping mechanism is he reads like 12 books a week. So, which is good because he's a writer. So, anything else? One more?
So, do you ever write under the influence of alcohol or some other substance? And is there a story there?
Oh, wow.
That's for you, Zach.
That's for me. The only thing I write under the influence is just a big ass pot of coffee. I'm happy to say that's my only addiction when it comes to writing. Was that the question? Like, what do I drink when I write? Water and coffee. Usually less water and more coffee.
I drink wine when I write.
Yeah.
But I write in the evening, and the first half of my day is I go to the gym, and I'm a housewife. And my unfortunate circumstance is I'm very inhibited creatively. Like, I'm not writing very much anymore. I just want to take a step back and just.
Well, then, if you write drunk, do you follow Hemingway's? Oh, well, I'm sorry. Maybe that was a bit extreme. If you write while drinking a simple glass of white
is the
wine,
word, uninhibited.
do you then edit sober? Or rather, do you edit drinking water?
That's what the T-shirt says. No, I go through different phases, but sometimes I wrote a piece for the New York Times about Key West, and I was privileged to do that. But it was the middle of the pandemic, and I was terrified of writing anything at all. And we have a small apartment in New York, and I was sitting at the dining table, and I was waiting for my husband to excuse himself for bedtime so that I could work on this piece, which was due yesterday. And I was exasperated, and I got stoned, and I just sat there looking at the fire I had made, and I just turned to him and I said, "Could you go to bed?" That was the clean version. That was the Muppets version. And he said, "It's 700 words, you fucking moron." I said, "It's 750. I know that's not the answer, but it's my answer. And I finished it that night in 2 hours. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.